The topic today is your subject at risk.
When the film won an Academy Award, somehow her husband thought that it came with a price tag of $1 million. Well, as a filmmaker, I really wish it did. But then began a lengthy blackmailing process in which her husband started blackmailing the filmmakers into trying to get money out of us. And we had to make him understand that there is no money that comes with something like this. And then he started threatening his wife. And we were very lucky because in one way that when we started showing the film in the UK and in the United States, people wanted to give to these women. And a donor came forward and said that he wanted to donate a house. And we were able to, through a non-profit, get her a house, and that's how she was able to separate from her husband. But the process of being blackmailed continuously was very trying for us because we've never had to go through something like that, and also we were afraid that that he would further harm Rukhsana, and she was. She's not educated, she is very poor, and she was also led to believe that she could make a lot of money once the film won the award. So she was also in some way sucked into this whole kind of rigmarole of fame. Every television channel was literally knocking on her door the night after we won the Academy Award, and she thought that she deserved a lot of money for it. And so once the house came forward and we were able to kind of step back from it and put a non-profit between us and channel the funds through that, then it became much easier.
There were secret police all over the place. I mean, I think, you find yourself in these situations all the time where somebody's got a camera phone and is all of a sudden like following you around with a camera phone, and you're sort of like looking at them, and then you turn your camera towards them, and it's kind of this like camera face off, and you're like, and then you walk away and you have no idea who that person was, but you're probably in some video file someplace in the military intelligence. So I feel like everybody who is in that square has been uploaded many times on YouTube and is very visible. I don't think that they're going to use this film to circle people and single people out.
This was a really unique filming experience because what ended up happening, so we started filming 6 months before that crackdown in December 2010. And the theater group that we were following had to flee the country. And then it was sort of like anyone's best guess as to what was going to happen. In the end, half of them ended up deciding to sneak back into the country to try to keep the theater alive. And at that point, we really faced, an important decision point, like, were we going to go with them? Would we get them in trouble by doing that? What was the best way to capture that experience? And what we ended up doing after a lot of discussion was finding a local cinematographer who had state accreditation to own a camera, which really mitigated the risks for her, because if she got pulled over, she could sort of flash this badge and say, I'm allowed to be doing this, of course not saying what she was filming. And then she worked with us to basically smuggle the hard drives over the border to either Lithuania or Russia, where the packages wouldn't be opened, and shipping us hard drives. So every 3 or 4 months, we would be getting this sort of like treasure trove of footage.
I've done national security reporting for a while, coming from photojournalism. Like, I used to work for the Village Voice, for The Nation, sort of reporting on national security issues. But this is sort of the first time I would say that I've actually had to report in the middle of a full-blown FBI investigation, which means when accessing both of my main characters, I have to assume that my emails are read, my text messages are read, my phone calls are monitored. So it's like, how do you really report and tell the truth under these circumstances? So that is really some of the issues with terror, to put it lightly.
Everybody would probably agree that the getting releases immediately is possibly the most important part of making a documentary, and if you don't do it, you really end up in a pickle. And I think, you can be as upfront as you can try, can be in the beginning about what this movie's going to be and what it's going to be like, but you just never know, and that's part of the, you know, the joy and also the nightmare of making a documentary. Like, we had no idea what this film was going to end up being, and really down to even like 6 months before a locking picture, we're thinking about telling a pretty different story. So it's pretty hard to make guarantees up front to people, and I think that's sort of one of the burdens of being a filmmaker and a documentary filmmaker, and it's really hard for me, at least. You know, you feel like you're letting people down sometimes, but at the end of the day, I think your commitment has to be to just telling the best story you can, because that's going to be, and you know, in my case, what draws the most attention to the issue, and you kind of can't let like the individual desires like supersede that. And I think a lot of times the subjects are unhappy, especially until the film gets out more. You know, like there's 15 members of the theater troupe. Like, we're not going to be able to feature all of them, and that was really, really disappointing to a lot of them. But again, you know, I think you have to just kind of make your movie. But without the releases, you are pretty much screwed.
I've been in a pickle many times, so.
It sucks. It really sucks.
But, you know, it's also very difficult to meet somebody and say, you know, trust me on this process, and then hand them a 5-page document and then say, sign this. There's something that also feels completely wrong about that. So, you know, I think it just depends on the person you're following, how you deal with them.
Well, for me, I live in Pakistan, which in itself is a danger. And I tell stories from that part of the world. So I don't leave. You know, I tell the story and I'm there the next day, and I'm there the day after that. My family lives there. And oftentimes when my films come out, there are a lot of problems for me personally, not only from the authorities, but also from you know, the people that I have filmed and their families or you know, extended families. So I think to a certain, there are a couple of things that I personally do. I don't ever appear in local media in Pakistan. I mean, I try and keep my name out of it as much as possible. And you know, when I make a film, after I make a film and it comes out, I just go underground for a while. You know, I might take off for a while and go on a speaking tour outside of Pakistan, or I might do things. But I think you don't, as a filmmaker, you never want the story to be you. You know, when the story becomes you, that's when that's a problem. And the story can become you if you live in the country where you're telling the story from. And so that's something that I've tried to avoid over the years. I've come very, very close to becoming the story. With Saving Face, I did become the story for many reasons. And even with the film that I did, the last film I did with the Taliban, I became the story because the military wanted to get back at me for what I had shown and exposed. But, you know, again, just as a subject knows the risks, the filmmakers know the risks as well.
With this film, I've talked to my legal advisor, who is also a character in the film, Rajia Omran, who is a human rights lawyer. And so I've been talking to her about the legal ramifications, and she keeps telling me, has anybody in the film, do you show anybody doing anything illegal? I say no, and she said that's it. There's nobody doing it. Nobody's doing anything illegal in the film until you have nothing to worry about. From a legal perspective, you know, it's such a Egypt is consistently changing, you know, and we've obviously, I was less concerned when the Brotherhood was in power. I'm more concerned now with the military in power, but you know, we'll see. Our film is currently in censorship, and censorship is waiting for the military's approval before they will allow us to show it in Egypt. So, but we've had a lot of, because the film has gained such momentum here, there's a lot of people that want to see it there. So we're figuring out creative ways to get it released there if it doesn't pass through censorship.
And with Tara, my co-director and myself have sort of had a good team of advisors, including Laura Poitras, who encouraged us early on not to really operate in fear, because you can't really, you know, produce a good story if you're reporting from a source of, oh my God, are they going to come for me today? And I honestly have never had that thought during this project. Maybe it's, you know, maybe it's ironic, But like, if you look at the history of this country, people survived COINTELPRO, people are surviving the NSA right now, like they're listening, but I just try to keep my communication secure. I think the risks, I would hate for my subject, anything to happen to him because of communication lapse or somebody, reading my Gmail or just something dumb like that. So I really try to keep, that's my best protection, I think, is safeguarding communications, because I don't want anyone knowing how I'm reporting. I have like a Faraday pouch for my iPhone because I don't want, I'm not about tracking. I just like to report, without monitoring as much as possible. And that's sort of that's the best we can do.
And I guess like we made an assessment really early on to work remotely. Like the presidential candidate that we had access to, who was subsequently imprisoned after running for the election that year, his like lead policy advisor disappeared while we were making the film. So at this point, I've just sort of crossed going to Belarus off my bucket list. And I think that so that was just an early decision that we made, but I don't think there's really ongoing risk for us.